Big surprise. We're all they've got, Walt. That's not enough, Moonrise Kingdom. 9/36/15, Los Angeles, California, 5/10/2014. Astaire returns a high round of flame to their red enamel kettle. Earlier, she had tried to find a few minutes for Tai Chi before the house woke to its usual frenzy, but the leaks did away with that vainglorious dream. It's one thing to be dragged from the coffers of sleep by her twins screaming about the flood, and another to find oneself trapped in the coffins of too many dead ideations, and probably still parental despite years of therapy. Forgive her the repetition. Never forgive her if she visits any of all that upon her 3 daughters. Now she considers Saturday's New York Times crossword, picked up earlier at Fixed Coffee, making little headway, less in earnest, looking for an answer to 25 across, Belize native, then settling her many thoughts into the peace of one thoughtless mote of trivia. About a year ago, the Times had published one Wednesday, probably Monday or Tuesday, that Astaire flew through. The theme, who, what, when, why, themed crosses starting with one of the 5 W's.
May 21, 2013.
Saturdays frequently don't have themes, and if there is one today, Astaire can't see it, but she's probably remembering that one now because of Xanther, the onslaught of water falling outside joined by her myriad of questions about rain, what Anwar has dubbed her question song, calming her out of that crescendo with teasing hints about her big surprise. Their big surprise, really. There goes her tea, though bright side, at least Astaire located another leak. And again, another splash exceeds the rim of her carefully steeped cup, or does a cup not steep? Only contents pouched within? China green in unbleached bags plus linden flowers, Panax ginseng, pollen for the honey flavor? Is this stuff even organic? Which, if it were just rain, might actually add a nice finishing and cooling spring note to this morning habit, but the house gets in the way. How many layers of old ceiling paint did one drop have to drip through? Not to mention the wires above, pipes covered in plaster dust, asbestos, plasterboard, arsenic-soaked wood. Is that right? Hadn't she read that joists and support beams in homes are soaked in poison to deter termites? Or was that just railroad ties and telephone poles, plus tar sheets, nickel-glazed nails, and clay tiles kept until today, with weeks' worth of urban pollutants, along with a mat of dusty pine needles and scraps of eucalyptus bark? It's amazing the old roof has managed this long to ward off as much water as it has, storm battering the roof's lazy pitch. Lucky if a tree doesn't fall too, one of the tall evergreens along their street. At least a branch or pine cone. Sounds like pine cones by the dozen are falling now, and if that really is just water up there, then the storm's aftermath should leave them little but Roman tiles and pieces, like so much cracked pottery, scattered to the lawn below. Good, at least, for the drought. Thus far, Shasti and Freya, actually enthused about their treasure hunt task, have found only 3 more points of ingress throughout the house. 2 in the living room and 1 in the dining area, precariously close to the piano. Anwar had discovered the first in his office precariously again, close to the computers, all their instruments under siege. And now the 5th, the kitchen, not even emerging from a seam, no corner beam around some pocketed bulb, just blobbing directly above Astaire from the paint itself until eventually thick enough, dark enough, heavy enough, it bombs away into her tea. And as with all issues arising out of this old but noble house, their good fortune and curse to call Cyril or not Cyril Kozaginski,
Owner and landlord,
who offered them the lease and in return for the low price on the agreed upon as is, Anwar will say no. Astaire will say yes. Wouldn't Cyril want to know about potential water damage, mold growth, other etc. in there? Itsy bitsy spider, her daughter's voices suddenly chorus, and not close either, upstairs now. Astaire grabs an 8-quart pot, glass lid still on. What would that do? Wouldn't. She isn't even sure what the pot will do. Her 2 8-year-olds are just inside the bathroom staring up at the gusher. Itsy Bitsy Spider had spontaneously become their code for a leak, though this one, the 6th, was far greater than any of the others. No need for this, Astaire laughs, meaning the pot. They all laugh. The worst leak of all had ended up right above the kid's bathtub, a small piece of good news, Astaire happily accepts, and like that the good news in her mind compounds. Piano spared, computers spared, books or anything perishable, anything theirs spared. So far the only thing lost, the contents of 1 cup of tea, another coffee is what she really needs. The top of the stairs, however, checks Astaire's enthusiasm. Shasti spots the telltale splatter first, the 7th leak, on the top step. Freya centers the pot under the drip, and then both go off to discover another 8th in the den, but again sparring the large plasma screen and Anwar's various gaming platforms, sparring even the black faux leather couch. Nothing the twins can't fix with a big salad bowl. Astaire urges them to get rain ready, Astaire heading back to her own room for better socks and a hat. Tamor is late. All the joys of a 1-car household of 5, soon 6, but who knows if she's called. The phones haven't stopped ringing for days. This morning was the worst. Landline and both Anwar's and Astaire's cells, Anwar's email accounts, all suffering the deluge too. At least there, her email account, Astaire was spared. Her phone sits on the edge of her bed, silenced but for the constantly illuminating screen marking yet another message, the number of missed calls staggering. Astaire can't face the number. For reasons too pathetic to admit, Anwar and Astaire couldn't unplug all the cordless phones. One remains a reminder in Anwar's office, and it's been ringing straight for 3 days. Also on the bed waits the thick manila envelope. The return address says all she needs to know about who it's from, herself in fact, at least contents by, if not, what matters, the final words, filling margins, unseen, grade topping the title page. You're still not opening it? Anwar had asked again this morning. Her paper arrived yesterday. Tonight, when we have time to celebrate. Anwar had tilted his head cautiously, the way he does when enough doubt and fear prevents him from keeping his gaze level. Okay. Feasibly, Astaire quickly admitted. It wasn't hard to admit. I could get a lousy grade, but the likelihood that this thesis will be out and out failed is highly improbable. From what I've heard, the only papers not passed are those deemed incomplete. Have you forgotten what my advisor wrote about the penultimate draft? A rave that had, even back then, started Astaire thinking about trying to get her work published by a university press or even a big New York house. Once she had her diploma in hand, of course. Of course, Anwar had smiled warmly. He was so excited he nearly died of a heart attack. Llewellyn Flobler was still on medical leave. Astaire didn't doubt that Lucien and Donna had called or emailed with good news. Their Twitter accounts read as variations on celebration, or Ronnie Bourne's Instagram account showed a video of a champagne bottle popped, looking vaguely obscene, Astaire not having seen anything close to that graphic in years. She couldn't remember the last time she'd even seen a clip of porn, likely by mistake, and likely sooner than when she'd last enjoyed a bottle of the Old Widow, chilled and uncorked. On Facebook, most of Astaire's classmates kept posting their results, making her restraint seem more ridiculous by the hours. Shanna Bix had gotten an A, Davis Trentz an A-. Cardiff Chambers had only gotten an A, but received an invitation to publish with University of Chicago Press, her book tentatively titled, Don't Say Things You Don't Mean Things You Don't Say. Even the most ominous news, Phoenix Opal Eller had earned a C+, which was still passing, but what did I expect? I handed in verse. Was gilded by another publishing offer, this one from Autumn House Press, for a collection of poems entitled Speeches We'll Never Make. Maybe Astaire should have stuck with her first gimmicky notion, sweet ways of framing difficulties in living and love, emphasis on sweet, ice cream cones. Instead, Astaire had pursued something a bit more aloof, not to mention ambitious, and not at all publishable. She took as her starting point, if not outright inspiration, the grand tradition of thought experiments. Rather than treat standard canonical texts from which to deviate with exegetical propositions, or cull and cultivate existing data from which to derive new conclusions, Astaire had resolved, in keeping with theories of analysts at its most curative lengths frame, the power of boundaries, economy free of compounding costs, confession without retribution, inquisition without judgment, to simply encompass as best as I can, or enclose, surround, wall in, engirdle, hem, and haw, in regard to moral and spiritual and even esoteric cravings, ecstasies, Faulkner had suggested before his heart faltered, the question of our times. As might be expected with such a ridiculous and arrogant, even wince-worthy pursuit, quest, Faulkner had shouted in his office. The paper had not come easy. Depending on how one counted, a disproportionate amount of time, 9 years, had gone into its modest 81 pages, and all this in the pursuit of a degree in marriage, family, and child counseling. The title was double, triple, quadruple, wince-worthy. Hope's Nest on the Necessity of God. Lewin Faulkner accepted, and with enthusiasm too, finally, that Astaire's atheism made her the perfect candidate for such a long ago divested from her adolescent indoctrination as a Catholic, which had imprinted in her as its last notion that the Church was principally about opposing abortion. She'd had two ages 15 and 16, same-sex rights, she'd married gay friends. Contraception, she'd been on and off the pill since she was 16, while pro-delayed gratification, why else leave her future unopened for so long, and pedophilia, for which now, as a mother of 3 daughters, she could find no breath of forgiveness, knowing still there always must be forgiveness, that sublime breath of discovery and compassion, but how to excuse such a trespassing, ordination, crime, to overdetermine a future of one so open to the future, and then by a handful of hot, sweaty breaths, some hasty rape, closed permanently to the future. Wasn't the notion of divinity in part a way to re-articulate the fixed joint to the bone, Faulkner had asked, loose breath upon dead waters, Faulkner had asked later, and stir forth possibilities? Such a beautiful man, rewrite the sands so that what stands is always unwritten? Anwar, her most beautiful man, had asked when he had finished reading her paper for the first time. God fastens the universe in the movement of God, said Reb Jorda.
The Book of Questions by Edmund Jabez.
Anwar had quoted after reading her labor for the nth time. What better accomplice for such a task than her husband, also an avowed atheist, his own divergence from uniformity, control, having come with his youthful discovery of algebra of all things, and basic, the ABCs of go-to, all while Anwar claimed once both my parents cast his mother, fiery Fatima, a pharmacist and a Shiite, pestling her own rationalism with his father's subtle whimsy, Shinoda Iskandar bin Ibrahim, an engineer and a Sufi, twinkling and blue as deep water, a spell carving a doorway in that fortified wall of their belief, through which I could not only ponder stars out of reach of constellations, but finally escape. Astaire even lifts it in both hands, considers again the familiar weight, the return address, Pacifica Graduate Institute,
249 Lambert Road, Carpinteria, California, 93013.
Shocked then by doubt's assault, what if this isn't even the paper, but some thick catalog of billing instructions in regard to past fees she overlooked, or worse, what if this is, as expected, her thesis, but with both grade and evaluation returning her to additional coursework and years more of writing, or potentially the impetus to quit, door closed? What if she's wrong about everything? Astaire knows she's neither presumptuous nor proud, except where her children are concerned. She knows she's more than capable of failure, experienced it many times. After all, her relationship with the father of her first child had failed grotesquely, no other word for it. She also knows that, couched in her desire to celebrate, in the word itself to honor, is already an awareness of preparation, too, for the ensuing discomfort, grief that will accompany this scholastic termination. School over. Getting older. Just turned 40. 40 is only 40. Thoughts that turn her cheeks to fire, forehead too, definitely already old. Her armpits too. Hey, is this a legitimate hot flash? Astaire sets the envelope back down on the bed. Whatever the furniture holds can wait until tonight, with a good bottle of bubbly, with an obscene uncorking, plus feeling again more optimistic. She wants the whole family there, including their new, if outrageous, addition. Still, the sight of the envelope on the edge of their California King makes it seem so exposed, so open to misuse or disposal or harm. What if a ninth leak suddenly opens up above and turns anything of paper to mush? Astaire places it in their bathroom closet, second shelf, tucked between a stack of folded towels. No more. Shasti starts. Freya usually starts from her doorway. 8 itsy-bitsies, Freya adds. We didn't check the guest whatchamacallit. Daddy's workshop. Is it really a guest house? It used to be a garage. We didn't go out and check there. Astaire loves them beyond herself, far beyond their similarities. Her friends see identical twins, but she and Anwar behold vast differences. Freya wider, nearly broader in her ability to insist. Shasti nimble, nearly acrobatic in her skill at dancing around conversations or rooms. Will you check if Tamor has arrived yet? She has, they said together, in that unison those less familiar with their personal deviations from morphological oneness might describe as uncanny. She's in the driveway, in unison again. Then let's scoot. But neither Shasti nor Freya moves. You promised, Freya says, once we finish searching for itsy-bitsy leaks, to tell us about Xanther's surprise, before Xanther finds out. Unison. Astaire wishes the twins would just once show some compassion for their sister. Even an iota of interest might do. Astaire knows they love Xanther, even look up to her. Some kind of untraceable awe. They're simply because she's older, and yet, for whatever reason, simply too young. They cannot answer Xanther's desire for their amity. Xanther, who so freely, too freely, will grant loyalty and respect to anyone, any creature, another thought to keep re-breaking Astaire's heart. Just this morning, as father and daughter dashed out into the rain, Astaire watched Xanther pause Anwar's race for their car, so he wouldn't crush any snails making their way across the sidewalk, squatting under her bright orange umbrella to assist every antennaed pilgrimage to a greener and puddled safer side. From the doorway, the twins, though, had squealed their incredulous mockery over this latest display of odd behavior, because it was raining, because snails were ew and gross, and because it was something they would never do, because, followed by their nearly indecipherable speech, Anwar thought that the description was generous, more like a fax line. The magic, wonder, and maybe frustration of twins, Dr. Sandwich had said on more than a few occasions. Dr. Elena Sadawai, Astaire's therapist, 50 hours required from birth to now. Her daughters' lives had demonstrated plenty of all that, along with behavior that their age might condone, but which Astaire had never seen in Xanther at any age. Extreme self-involvement with obvious disregard for the feelings of others. They're only 8. Thoughts inflicting Astaire with plenty of guilt. After all, Freya and Shasti were not evil twins, nor were they unkind. They were just very, very interdependent. What Anwar and Astaire were sure came from their interiority they alone could share. Curiously, though, and contrary to expectation, the older Shasti and Freya got, the more they indulged in that ego-sustaining and inflating interiority. And while continuing to find and refine themselves in the privacy of their own resemblance would no doubt pose troubling complications in the need for and purpose of identity, at present this by-inwardness afforded a powerful sense of confidence. If only it didn't have to come across as condescending and outright smugness. Anwar had suggested sending them to opposite sides of the globe for a summer. Astaire, too, wanted to see more conflict. Not that there wasn't any bath-time squalls could flood the floor tiles. Too often, though, Astaire had watched in an escalating dispute instantly disappear in the presence of another, whether a classmate, friend, or innocent playground socializer interloper, the twins would close ranks and with a dimpled smile disappear into their own inviolable sameness. Astaire had seen them do it numerous times to Xanther. They'd even done it to her. No doubt flawless features reinforce this entitlement to distance. Freya and Shasti pull focus wherever they go, even causing Astaire now and then twinges of resentment, dread, however fleeting. They're only 8. Silky things of withy limbs, sly smiles and shiny cheeks, skin light as nutmeg, hair like dark honey, and eyes the color of warm brass, extraordinary eyes, arresting eyes, impenetrable eyes, her 2 Cleopatras. Get them an agent now, Astaire has heard enough times to start giving move to Juno serious consideration. Xanther's big surprise, their new addition, was no doubt in part supposed to address this sororal insularity. 3 sisters, the old logic went, should have one another, but Astaire and Anwar knew better than to put all their faith in old logic. Truth, the twins had each other. Which left Xanther with what? Without the sisters she still had. Without the father her sisters never had, Dove. And meaningless to Frey and Shast, thankfully, as he was meaningful to Xanther, thanklessly, and thanklessly meaningful to Astaire, even meaningful, thanklessly to Anwar. Perhaps on some level the girls considered Xanther's condition a kind of companion, Anwar had puzzled out late one evening. It's, after all, always with her, about her, how she feels, how much she sleeps, what she eats, and it gathers so much of our attention we're probably not even aware of how much we should check in with Xanther for signs of fatigue or distress, though I bet Freya and Shasti are aware. Anwar was probably not far off, and wasn't this, in the end, the only problem Astaire had been trying to solve for over a year, watching Xanther going more independently up, to locate and secure for her child a better companion, able to return her loyalty, kind, comforting, rejuvenating, protective, enduring, because there was no question, by its constant threat and constant terror, epilepsy served as a constant reminder of how much different Xanther was from her sisters and parents and almost everyone else. Her odd looks didn't help either. Extremely pale skin, even Dove wasn't that pale, Astaire tanned as well. And as of late, now, poor kid, stippled too with wounds of maturing, the backs of her arms rarely without an abrasive rash, her cheeks and forehead a fizz of acne. Add to that, what a list. Pudginess around her waist, knock knees swollen too like pomelos, early arthritis, the suspicion was there, terrible eyesight, screwball teeth, her own blend of dyslexia or just a learning disability, and poor dexterity, all of which compounded the crushing, caustic social challenges Xanther has had to face in school and after school. Astaire and Anwar might have finally opted for homeschooling, a conversation they have had at least once a month, were it not for the emergence of a new promising friends this year. All of which still didn't take into account Dove's death, which, in her search for leaks, whom Astaire had just found in Xanther's room on her corkboard, pinned beside those equations in Anwar's beautiful hand, not in determining forms, something like that, a note from Dove. You're tougher than mud, don't forget it, love, Dove. Mud, to Dove's mind, aside from being his patronymic, was beyond defeat. Boot heels, bullets, and tanks could tear it up, and mud would be none the worse. Sometimes Dove even hinted that death itself had nothing on mud. Not that anyone was calling him mud now. The military had all sorts of terms for what he was now. Dow, Dweria, KIA, plus zapped, wasted, greased, dusted, planted, expedited, made a believer, checked out, fallen in the line of duty, hero, sung or unsung, how about auto-tuned, or whatever you call the death of men at the hands of other men when you don't want to call it murder. Astaire couldn't go there. But just the sight of his penmanship, forget the words, that brutal hand, expelled her from its sight. Love? Dove and Astaire had been so young, so in love. What did they know then about the cost of dying, or for that matter, the cost of living? Xanther measured out the cost of living every day she trundled off to Thomas Starr King, Obligingly, bravely, taking in those big gulps of air, Astaire could hear the questions this child obligingly, bravely, breathlessly, but resolutely too, refused to say out loud. Is this the day it finally happens? Lose it in front of everyone? Wet myself in front of everyone? Hurt myself beyond repair? And even if the pronouns were different, Xanther wasn't the only one who asked those questions. Just a glance at the ragged mess around her fingernails communicated more than the lengthiest essays on the nature of distress. One recent evening, Astaire had looked in on Xanther to find her, even bound up in sleep, picking at her cuticles until they bled. For 20 minutes Astaire had sat, cross-legged, beside her daughter, attempting to gently parry every stab, but the nails never failed to return, and pick patiently, fixedly, always set on violence. So why not a companion? Why not answer all of this with a hero who was not dead, not violent, but bred and trained to defend, not some regimen of pills, or a calendar surfeit with checkups, or some new app for counting carbs and fat, not a doctor or a pair of wily sisters, or even a parent, or God forbid, God. Is that what it will take? Some new proto-beta whatever online PlayStation Xbox game, but rather a pet. A magnificent creature, to stroke and dote on and tend to, furry and friendly and honest and near, one who will watch over Xanther and need her, and if need be, pin her down with all that fur and softness until the seizure stops. Hers to take care of, hers to adore, hers to turn to confide into, hers alone. In Anwar's office, the phone continues to ring. Outside, Tamor begins to lightly honk. A tricky moment approaches. Astaire has a choice, but not much of one. The twins will either embrace the idea enthusiastically, sensing rightly that they will be both revelers and owners too, or reject it as another unfair act of favoritism. Xanther's infirmities be damned in the eyes of these two gorgeous girls. Astaire sits down on the edge of the bed to meet their eyes on their level, pinching her knees together maybe a little too tightly, resting the back of her right hand in the palm of her left, maybe a little too contained. Your dad took your sister this morning to get, Astaire begins, giving them as many details and reasons as she could summon. Shut up, Astaire. They're only 8. A dreadful moment follows, dreadful enough for Astaire to relish Tamor's increasingly louder honks along with their only unsilenced phone, the home's canary, ringing, and not just these, a high-pitched whistle also joins the mix downstairs. Shasti and Freya don't even look at each other or hold each other's hands as they sometimes do when they are stressed and confused, but their eyes widen, their chests expand, their lips burst. Finally, they let it out. Breath and voice, even starting to jump up and down. Chirps, squeals, even jumping up onto the bed. More squeaks, screams, giggles. And as if equally caught up, the ringing pauses, the honks too. But not the whistle, though it's at this point almost sputtering out. A slight note of something burning starting to drift upstairs. Stove, kettle. Nothing compared to the twins' rising chorus. We're getting a dog! 9:51:09, Los Angeles, California, 5/10/2014.